Hi, welcome to Inside Washington Courts, a new series of video and audio interviews sponsored by the Administrative Office of the Courts. My name is Monta Morton, and I'm a staff person with the Office of Communications and Public Outreach. Today we will be exploring the topic of street law. And here with me is Judge Scott Stewart with the Issaquah Municipal Court, and Miss Margaret Fisher, staff person with the Administrative Office of the Courts and a professor at the Seattle University School of Law. Now, street law is a global program focused primarily on high school students, educating them on the rule of law and civics. Some of the elements of practical law taught include awareness of human rights, civil rights, democratic principles, conflict resolution, and a whole slew of other law-related topics. Georgetown University Law Center developed a program in 1972 that the program here in Washington State originated from. Thanks to the efforts of Margaret Fisher, who brought street law program from Georgetown University Law Center to Washington State in 1982. In 2003, you added the concept of volunteer judges pairing with teachers, and to teach one class a week and use lessons drawn from the national street law text using local cases. One important note, through the Washington Judges Foundation support and funding, they have been made it possible for the street law program to offer schools at no cost the 2021 street law text, 10th edition, as either a ebook or hardback, along with 2 teacher manuals. And also the training programs like you've had today here at the Administrative Office of the Courts, CTAC office. Travel costs are also covered for participating judges and teachers. So today was training day, and for the judges and teachers, how did it go? And what did you cover today?
Okay, well, every year we offer this training to the new sites, and I'm lucky enough to have some of, I won't say old, but the experienced sites. So Judge Stewart is one of the judges who's been doing the program in Issaquah High School for about 10 years. He and Judge Michelle Gelson came in, who's also been doing it for many years in Bothell High School, and they share their experience, and but we want the teachers to know, and the judges as working with teams, what's to be expected of each member of the team, of the judges, of the teachers, and to help them plan for the coming semester, which will be this fall of 2019, excuse me. So they get exposed to the content of the materials, which address introduction to law, criminal and juvenile law, housing, torts, family law, constitutional law, and then topics of special interest. It's as important in street law that they know the topic and engage with the students as it is the interactive methods, so we demonstrate those as well. What would you add, Scott?
Well, I would say we go through a lot of the interactive methods. The judges get to learn. It's a fun program. We're actually participating in what the students are going to be participating in. Michelle and I both bring some unique, we've been doing it long enough that we've developed our own session plans. I do a voir dire technique where I teach the judges how to pick a jury. Michelle does a sentencing technique arising out of an incident that occurred in her city years ago, and shows how she gets the students to think about the type of elements that go into sentencing on a more local level. So it goes kind of beyond the book, even though we work with the book as well. And frankly, every year it's a great refresher because it reminds me of a couple of things I can bring back to my high school when I get back there in the fall. And I'll be teaching 2 classes this year, so I need more materials.
Okay, great. And we have 2 new sites this year that we're adding at Franklin Pierce and at Puyallup. We also have a team coming in from Sunnyside that is going to implement the program, and we had additional group from down near Thurston County, 2 judges, the city prosecutor from Lacey and a teacher who are going to implement the program. So it was a big full class today, and I think they all thanked me. I haven't looked at the evaluations yet, but I could tell from their responses it was very positive.
I think everybody enjoyed themselves.
Yeah, I noticed that. They seemed really engaged.
Yeah.
Really were. So Chief Justice Mary Fairhurst and the other justices on the bench of the Supreme Court have advocated for that our children in Washington State need a strong understanding of civics. How does the Street Law program achieve this goal?
Well, if you look at the content of a civics class, it's really understanding about government and the role of the citizen or the individual student, how they have a role to play in that government and making government accessible. And that's exactly what street law is about. Not only do they learn about different branches of government, but there are activities where they see whether it's either as the judge role or as the legislative role or the individual citizen and drafting a law or writing to a public official. They work on ways that they, as individuals, can participate. Or even as simple as bringing a case to small claims over something they got ripped off about. Just knowing that government isn't this entity way over there, it's something that they are a part of.
And I think that's something that having the judges come in gives them too, because it's a real life judge, and you're talking about my life. I mean, you show up, you're not talking about necessarily specific cases, but what they're learning about is what I'm doing on a daily basis, and I'm able to bring that to them and make it very real. Sometimes I've had the students come and sit on the bench with me, and that's a huge impact. They'll bring it back and report to the other students. More students want to do it. It gives them a real understanding of what's going on. And some of the issues that we're dealing with the opioid issue that we're dealing with at my court level, and that they hear about, you don't, because of most of the guys are still in school, they're still doing well, it's not a real part of their life, and suddenly they realize that it's out there and something they're going to have to address in the real world someday, and it's something that we're dealing with on a daily basis. So it becomes very real for them, and some of the anecdotal stuff I think is pretty powerful.
What are some of the topics? I mean, I covered a couple principles, but what?
At our school, criminal law is huge because it's interesting. Constitutional law is really big, especially constitutional law as it touches students. There's a lot about Tinker, the Supreme Court case. We do a little bit on tort, not a lot, little, but we do a lot on torts. They pointed out that it's not something necessarily the students know what it is, and so they kind of shy away from it. I started calling you Mary, but Margaret then says that once they figure out what it is, they're into it. The torts is a big deal. So those are probably the 3 that they have the most fun with, and then we touch on some other topics as we go through.
And another sort of a life skills kind of topic that's there is landlord-tenant. And one of the judge, Michelle Gelson, pointed out that in her street law class, she brings in a person who at age 21 took her landlord to court to small claims and was successful, and brings that person into court. Now here's a young phase, showed how the courts could be made to work for a person, and also teaches about landlord-tenant law. So many of these students are heading out to rent an apartment for the first time. Another point that Judge Gelson makes in her classes is she really focuses on explaining the consequences of actions. And some of the scenarios we went through this morning, you could be prevented from getting financial aid, you might be prevented from getting a job. So they really want people to see the consequences of things that dumb decisions might result in.
Very basic thing like stealing a candy bar, or worse than that, stealing a beer. Now you've got an MIP impact you're admission into college, and you've got a theft on your record, and nobody wants a theft on the record for employment. Michelle goes out of her way to make sure that folks understand bad short-term decisions can have long-term impact. So it's almost like the students become, you're doing the same thing in the courtroom. Sometimes you're teaching the young people, teaching the students, but hopefully you're getting them before they get to that point.
So the concept of pairing judges and teachers is not a usual thing for other states. How did that concept come about?
You're right. We are the only state in the United States and the only country in the world that does this. I have run the street law program with law students, which is its original model from when I was in Georgetown to being at Seattle U, since 1977. But when I was out here, I made a presentation to the judges at the Judicial Conference, and Judge Riley, who was the president of the Washington Judges Foundation, came up to me and said, is there a way our judges could get involved with street law and not just give money? We're willing to give some money, but is there a way we could get involved, like maybe helping to teach street law? And my thought was, what judge would be willing to make a commitment to go in once a week to a classroom? And I did a distribution list email request, and I had over 19 judges volunteer. And that was just for the pilot that we did at LaConner High School. And every year, the Judges Foundation, with their funding, I've been able to add more sites, and I have never had a trouble finding a judge who was willing to volunteer. And some people, like Judge Scott here, have participated for 10 years. That's not an expectation we have of the judges. We don't ever give them a time limit on how long they're volunteering for, but if it's a good, if it meshes well, then many do continue.
So how do you feel about working with teachers and working in the classroom?
I've worked with two. We've become close friends. They're hands-on. We'll get there day one. The teachers, even though it might be the first day of class, the teachers usually know some of the students. They're necessary because they can point out the students that have difficulties with different things. One of the things a number of us talked about today is the uncomfortable situation when you have students reading, and you have to deal with the fact that maybe the student has difficulty reading and how you get through that. Teachers can help you with that type of thing. There's any number of other things that happens in a courtroom dynamic that is obviously different than a courtroom, where a teacher can jump in and give you a hand. And I work with both of my teachers on a regular basis. We're in constant communication. You have a syllabus, you have a game plan, but the dynamics of the process are such that things change, and we try to stick on top of it and work together. So they both, Mr. Ritzer retired from teaching and moved to Singapore, and he and I remain fast friends. I mean, we developed strong friendships through the programs. Part of the reason I'm probably still doing it, but I also have students that still drop by my court just to let me know how they're doing after they graduated. So it's kind of cool to maintain that contact with people outside of the criminal justice system.
So if you want more judges to volunteer, what would you tell them? And why did you become a volunteer for the street law program?
I think I was at a Public Trust and Confidence Committee meeting, and Margaret was there, and she's pretty persuasive.
She is.
I think judges on the whole are folks that like to contribute to their community. I don't think you have to work that hard. They need the opportunity, they need to have the time. Judges can sometimes be involved in a lot of different things. But teaching is something I think that just is something most of us enjoy. And when an opportunity there, I was going to jump all over it. But most of the judges, Rebecca Robertson out there in Federal Way is doing it. She's a friend of mine. Andrea Beal is here today. They're friends of mine. Most of the judges, I think if they have a teacher that wants them and they can fit in their schedule, it's the type of thing they enjoy. I get way more out of it than I put in.
And I will say that occasionally the judge who participates in the program is someone I had as a law student who taught street law in high school. Like today, Commissioner Paul Wohl came in from Thurston County District Court, and he was my law student 30 years ago. So there are ones like that who love working with students and come. And some I have found that some people debated early on in their career, do I want to be a teacher, do I want to go in the law field? So it gives them a chance to go back and to have that positive interaction with students as opposed to the negative situations they might find in their day-to-day courtroom.
And plus, I think judges are looking to contribute to the community wherever they can. And what better opportunity than go and work with young people that aren't necessarily part of the criminal justice system yet. So.
And I just have to say, I take my hat off to the judges. They do volunteer, and they put tremendous effort into doing a good job with their students. And people around the country are very impressed with the judges here in Washington State.
So what is the current state of street law and in Washington State, and what are your future goals for street law?
Take over the world.
Yeah.
Street law, I have trained over 50 pairs around the state. And some sites have continued and some sites not. People retire, believe it or not. Things happen. But I would just like to continue adding to the pairings. And we talked about some specific things that we would like to do to maybe create a lesson plan bank for lessons that the judges have created on their own, or a video bank that judges could have access to, little 3-minute trigger videos that would go to help with their lessons, because students really respond to videos.
And the class, and one of the things I picked up on today from Michelle and other folks too is the class is popular. I mean, it's called Street Law. I mean, and it's an elective. My class is always full. Next year we have 2 classes. Michelle was talking about how full her class is. Once you get into a school, I think it becomes a popular elective. Margaret and I tried to move it into I won't mention the school district's name, but the whole thing just kind of made them nervous at one point. And so it wasn't that we couldn't do it, it's that they didn't know how they could fit it into their curriculum with multiple different high schools, and was it proper to have it one and not have it the other and stuff like that. So it didn't happen. So I think some of it's just educating the school districts on the availability and how positive a thing it would be for their students. But Margaret keeps getting it bigger, so.
Right. And as I say, we have over 50 pairings going on out there, which is always encouraging. And judges run into other judges who've done it and get positive press from them. And this video will help.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think that's where we'll end our interview. Thank you, Judge Stewart and Ms. Fisher, for joining us today and talking with us about street law. And it's been very educational. And thank you, audience, for viewing and listening to Inside Washington Courts. Stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.